All right, guys, welcome back to Someday Soon. I am your host, Mark Fiacco. Before we get into the episode today, really quick, just if you guys could give the show a follow on all social platforms, subscribe on YouTube, drop a comment, let me know what you guys are thinking of the episodes and who I should have on next. It'd be greatly appreciated. Really appreciate all the great feedback that's been coming in this far on the show. And today we have a really great episode for you. If you're a Central New York or Upstate New York native, you already know who we're here today. You could probably tell by the background. And if you've ever thought that your ideas were, not niche enough, not, down to one lane enough, then I think today's episode is really going to open your scope as to what's possible with your businesses and your endeavors. Today we have Eddie Brennan, the CEO of Ayrloom and the president of Beak and Skiff and 1911 here in Lafayette, New York. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun to be. I've never sat here in our tasting room. In the middle here. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it's an awesome backdrop.
It's beautiful. I mean, we walked in, there's just so many awesome, products, and we were talking about how awesome the brand is. So it's like, let's just work the brand right into the shots is great.
Yeah, this was like very intentional. This is a barn. We found all the timber in Pennsylvania. It's all reclaimed timber from an old barn that had fallen down in Pennsylvania. We found it, brought it back here, reconstructed it, and then the floor is really cool. It's all stamped concrete in here, which you wouldn't realize until you drop a glass bottle and then it shatters.
Yeah,
but it does look like old wood. So
yeah, it's beautiful.
This is the epicenter of 1911.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much for having me here to record also.
Of course.
And I kind of gave a rundown of your titles here at the businesses, and people who know the businesses know that they're incredibly successful. It's a well-known brand, and you hear president or you hear CEO and people might have kind of a preconceived notion about what that means for that business and what their day-to-day looks like. But, if you could peel back the curtain a little bit, what does your, day in the life as CEO and president of a company this size, what does it look like?
Yeah, well, those titles are cool, but the biggest title is like that I represent the fifth generation of our business, right? So like that comes with itself a lot of pressure, but also there's so much history and heritage there. So just being a fifth generation family member alongside other great fifth generation family members in this business, we like to say the fifth generation gets along better than any other generation in our company. But it comes with a lot of responsibility, and I wake up every day and I get to drive around here, and it's amazing to be able to carry the business forward and really represent it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it is cool to see that, a lot of businesses don't survive through generational kind of things. It's, people's ideas change, or, maybe generations are brought up a different way. Obviously, the business is founded in 1911 as an apple farm here, hence the name.
Right.
If you could give me kind of just a quick history lesson on the business, where it started, and, from my own research, just looking through what you guys have all had going on here,
right, this
generation seems to have really spun the entire brand and company in a completely different direction comparatively to what had gone on previously.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, statistically, incredibly rare to get to a fifth generation. I think the numbers are like less than 1%.
Wow.
Typically, to get to a third generation I think it's like less than 15% of businesses get to the third generation. So to make it all the way to a fifth generation is unbelievable.
Right.
And then thinking how we get to a sixth generation, even harder to figure out. And that's something we're always working on. But history of our business today, we're essentially a beverage manufacturing company, as well as the largest cannabis company in New York State. But if you rewind back to 1911, if you look into the Lafayette Valley, you can see where the buffalo farm is, right at the Onondaga Reservation. That's where the first, right at that fence line is kind of where the first trees were planted. So it's a very significant part of our family business. And for the first 40, 50 years of our business, we were an apple orchard, a working family farm, and proud family farm. And today we're still a 1,000-acre family farm, and that's something we're incredibly proud of. But over the years, and still today, we realize how tough farming was as a business. Weather being such an incredibly devastating, beautiful and devastating part of our business. We had an event 3 Mondays ago where the temperature went down to 19 degrees here, just right behind where I am. And 15 years ago, we'd be out of business if something like that happened. And so today, we've been able to diversify to try to prevent that. But in the 70s, the late 70s was a really important foundational moment in our business. So we partnered with Cornell University and we're one of the first companies to ever use flash pasteurization with a fruit juice product. And that was revolutionary for our business because it allowed us to go from a week shelf life, fresh cider, to 90 days.
Wow.
So if you think about, we were just selling into farmers markets. Now we could sell at least outside of New York State. You know,
Right.
we could travel within New York State as well. But that was huge. If you look at a typical apple tree, only 50% of the apples on that tree are going to make it to a grocery store shelf. The other apples are going to be too big. You know, they're too small. You know, as American consumers, we want everything to look pretty.
Right.
And you know, we talk about how ugly apples make better hard cider. But 50%. We didn't have a home for 50% of the apples that we grew here for 50 years. So when we were able to start pressing cider and we built the cider mill here, that was huge because it took 50%. We had a home now for 50% of our other apples. And today we're one of the largest purchasers of juice apples. If you look back in the late 70s, early 80s, we had a cider mill. We were able to grow the apples. And then now we could press them and actually create a brand. Before we just had, you know, New York State grown apples branded as Beak and Skiff at times, but apples back then and today are just a commodity.
Right.
So we needed to be able to create a product that we could say, this is a Beak and Skiff grown product. And that's what fresh cider really did for us in the 70s and 80s. And at the same time, in the late 80s, Apple Hill was born. And a lot of people have been to Apple Hill. And today, if you come up here, obviously we're sitting in the tasting room, which was constructed 12 years ago. We have our big cafe and bakery. But you know, back in the mid 80s, we had our general store, and we had our pick your own orchard and a place to come get apples. And we had an unbelievable response from the Syracuse community. People wanted to come ride ponies and they wanted to come pick apples, but we couldn't harness that energy past 6 weeks, right? So if you think about a business built on 6 weeks, right? 90% of your revenue happens in 6 to maybe an 8 week time period. You know, when things went great, amazing.
Right.
You know, we'd have great years, but when the apples died in a frost, we had years with drought or hail, it could be catastrophic. And I remember growing up, and when my grandfather, Marshall Skiff, passed away, I got to read through some of his diaries. And most people's diaries you'd think would have, you know, revealing things about your life. His diaries were all about the weather. So it was all about like, you know, this happened last night, or the temperature went up to this, you know, down to this level, or we were running the wind machines last night, or all the things that he was working on. He was unbelievably passionate about weather and all things weather. So, but he always would joke when Apple Hill began and people would show up here. He always joked, like, people are going to actually pay to come pick our apples, because he always thought of the apples as, you know, that was a very challenging thing that they did here. So to see people come here and pick apples, that was another thing that was a really big part of our business, right? Because it attracted people here. And today we have a 50-acre pick your own apple orchard, and it's one of the largest pick your own orchards in New York State. And not only is it big in scale, we have 25 different varieties that customers can come pick here. And that was another seminal moment in our business where all of a sudden people would show up here and we had something to actually offer them, right? We weren't just a wholesale apple business that relied on grocery chains and farmers markets. People were actually showing up here. That's really takes us into the 90s, into the early 2000s, as we kind of approach the fourth generation of the family business. A lot of decisions need to be made on where we were going, right? We were a farm. We were passionate about farming. We could make fresh cider, but we were just trapped in this cycle of feast or famine, right? So we knew we could six or eight weeks. People love to be here, and outside of that, when apples weren't selling, weren't relevant on the store shelf, nobody cared about Beak and Skiff. Even the fresh cider business. A lot of people don't know this, just the jug cider you buy in grocery stores. Well, 80% of those sales are happening in the month of October. Wow. So, and maybe a little bit of September, but it's a very fall-centric piece of the business. If we fast forward to 1911, we like to say 1911 saved the family farm, because without 1911, we wouldn't be able to be here today, because ultimately there's so many patterns in weather, and every 10 years you're going to have a tough crop. It'd be hard to survive. So what 1911 did was it gave us a way to brand Beak and Skiff, instill the heritage, but have fun and like create a fun product that not only was it enjoyable to customers, but it was shelf stable. It lasts for 2 years. And it was a way for us to put our apples into something that actually had inherent value to people, right? We could brand it as premium. A lot of people don't realize that the majority of hard ciders that are on the market are made from concentrate.
Oh, wow.
So, a fresh cider product, when people could actually try it, it's so much better than some of the other ciders that people buy on the shelf. So constantly trying to evolve and change. And that's really the what I try to bring to the business is change. We love our heritage, but we don't want to be, imprisoned or chained by how we've done things in the past. We've always got to be looking forward and changing.
Right. Yeah. And well, first of all, as a fan of the brand, I can certainly say that the difference between a lot of the bigger brands of ciders and yours is definitely a huge deal.
You.
Absolutely. And having that, like you said, locally owned and not from the concentrates is a huge deal. But just kind of like future-proofing the brand and just, making it and making the place a destination.
Right.
I think you guys have done such a great job at. You're constantly, it seems like every year you guys are voted one of the best orchards, if not the best orchard in the country.
Yeah.
And you come here in the sun. Basically, most apple orchards, like you said, you're open for 6 weeks and that's kind of your deal. But you come here in the summer, anytime the weather's nice, this place is bumping. There's always people here enjoying, all the stuff that you guys have going on here. So it's a big jump in the business. And as you mentioned, this is, family business, you're 5th generation.
Right.
When you were growing up, was it kind of predestined for you to do this business? I know you, at first in your career, you had gone and done other things. Did you ever think that this was going to be the path for you? Did you think that you'd be, owning the family farm someday, or were you kind of, hesitant towards it when you were growing up?
Yeah, no, actually, I did spend, a lot of people think that I grew up on this farm and I spent a lot of time here as a kid. And that is partially true. I never grew up in central New York. My dad's job growing up, took us all over the country and ultimately the world. And so, I lived in Connecticut and Hawaii, California. I was born in Georgia. So I moved around all the time. Mm-hmm. And I would always come back here, and this was a fun place to come in the summer. And at times I worked on the farm, and I can honestly say I've done almost every job on this farm I've physically done on my own over the past 30 years. So very, very proud of that. So I understand every single job, down to trimming trees and picking apples. I've done them. Right. I've done them all.
Good characteristic of a leader right there. Yeah.
But never in a million years was, I think if the Beaks and the Skiffs families had to think of anyone who was going to ever come back here and be a part of the business, I don't think I would have even made the list. I wasn't one of the people to come, but I in traveling and my dad moving us around the country, an amazing experience, but challenging at times. And we moved to, I remember my freshman year of high school, we moved to Hawaii. And my dad told me at the time, all right, we're going to finish high school here. And at the time, and we'd moved, 6 or 7 times before that. And we hit my end of my sophomore year and we're walking on the beach together. And he breaks the news to me, we're moving to California. And for me, couldn't have been more devastating. I loved Hawaii, loved everything about it. So the last thing on my mind was Beak and Skiff and the family farm in upstate New York. Right? I was like a passionate surfer, just loved everything about Hawaii. And my brother still lives there, so he loves it even more than I do. But I ended up going to Colgate University, which is right down the road, and I went there to play lacrosse. Loved my experience there. But even when I was at Colgate University, right, stone's throw down the road, Beak and Skiff just was never on my mind that this is where I was going to end up. And I ended up in New York City. And in New York City, I worked for a company called Bloomingdale's. And so I wanted to go, my dad's side of the family, retail is in their blood. And I really wanted to get into retail. So my first job at Bloomingdale's, I was very excited. I went through the whole training program. It's a really well-renowned training program. And my first job was I became the assistant men's underwear buyer, which you would think, as a straight male, not the best, role to get.
Right.
And so you think about being a buyer, you think about going to fashion shows and being excited. Well, my first fashion show was a men's underwear fashion show. And I remember sitting with my older male boss, sitting there at the runway fashion show with half naked men walking down. And even then I didn't think about Beak and Skiff. It's like, I got to get out of this and, go back to the family farm. But, I worked my way up at Bloomingdale's and learned a lot about, lots of different merchandising, pieces of the business. And I think that was just an incredible training ground for me because, the family farm didn't need farming expertise. It didn't need
Right.
somebody who could come and do things the way they'd always been done. It needed a fresh set of eyes. And ultimately, it was my dad, Ed Brennan. So my grandfather, Marshall Skiff, had 5 daughters. A lot of his son-in-laws were involved in the business, and my dad was never involved in the business. But ultimately, he was the one who convinced me to come back. The farm had fallen on hard times. He had jumped into the business to try to help, and he convinced me to move back here. And ultimately, the tasting room was his vision, and all of this was really his vision. And it took some convincing to get me to want to come back to the farm. And when I showed up here, I think a lot of the 4th generation family members were like, who the hell is this guy? Why is this guy here? We don't need the help. We're doing, I think they had come to terms with there were some challenges with the business. But in order to make that pivot was going to require a lot of capital and a lot of, not that they weren't willing to do the hard work, but a lot of change. And that change was going to be, not only was going to be painful, but it was going to stretch everyone in ways that maybe they weren't ready for.
Right.
And we needed to bring in new blood into the business to help, break some things, bring some new ideas, and ultimately have a vision that could get us through the next 100 years, right? Because if we kept doing things the way they'd always been done, well, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. The business would have died.
Right. Yeah. And that's obvious. And it goes back to the statistic about generations of businesses. Like, I'm sure when it comes time to change, it's very hard at any level. Personally, it's hard to change at times. So especially when you've built this business that is, your baby basically, and your livelihood and everything that you want to represent yourself. And then you have the next generations kind of trying to steer it other directions. I'm sure that's where a lot of these fractures come in for businesses.
For sure.
So, and obviously with as big a swing as you guys took, this place I'm sure is night and day to what it was at the time. And so it's great to see. And with that experience in retail at Bloomingdale's, it's another, massively known organization. And like you said, great training program and all that. What types of things did you learn there that you were able to bring and apply to the business? And how crucial were those things that you learned there into building what we see here now today?
Yeah, well, they were critical. I learned everything from how to execute a launch of a new product. So, when I was doing, at one point I was the men's fragrance buyer. So like we had a new launch, I think it was a Chanel men's fragrance, but from iteration all the way to the finished product being presented to you to how am I going to merchandise this in the stores? Not only how am I going to merchandise it, how am I going to tell this story to the Bloomingdale's customer? And Bloomingdale's really taught me how to learn about who the customer was. Who's the customer showing up to our stores every day? How are they interacting with the product? And what's driving them to be here, right? Because no one needs anything there's nothing that Bloomingdale's is selling that's a necessity for anybody in their life, right? It's fragrances, makeup, fashion clothing, ties, all that stuff. No one needs any of that. And Beak and Skiff, it's very similar. No one needs anything that we're selling. I would argue some of the cannabis products potentially, but everything else here is discretionary income. It's a fun thing you're going to do with your family. I had to figure out here how to convince people that we were relevant outside of that 6 weeks where we knew everyone was going to come here. How could we sell outside of those? We have this data where the average customer here comes here one time a year, right? So you have an hour or 2 hours to make an impression on somebody. And so how do we get a customer to come here? And then how do we get them to interact with us when they're grocery shopping or when they're at their favorite restaurant? Or, maybe when they're in Florida on vacation, right? Because we're one of the best selling ciders in Florida. That was the secret sauce. And that's what I really learned at Bloomingdale's is how do we speak to our customer? And if you can make an amazing impression on a customer when they're in your retail location, the chances they're going to interact with your brand outside of this environment goes up exponentially.
Right.
So that's why we do everything that we do here. When there's not apple trees, why we'll talk about concerts. Why we got into the cannabis business. All these things all go back to if we keep doing things the way we've always done them for our farm, it won't exist, right? The 1,000 acres we have here will cease to exist. So it is uncomfortable to do a lot of the things that we've done. And there has been pain and we have made mistake after mistake. But ultimately we've learned from those mistakes and we've corrected and found ways on how to steer the ship. And for me, I'm not really motivated by money. I'm really motivated by keeping the legacy of the business going. And I think anybody who's worked with me here knows we keep reinvesting everything back into the business. Every single year, we're reinvesting back into the business on how can we make Apple Hill just a little bit better than we had it the year before. I think where businesses get in trouble, they hit these massive home runs quick, and then it's hard to sustain that. We just want to get a little bit better each year. Just keep hitting singles, and make sure when customers come here that they have the best possible experience that they can have.
Right. Keep hitting singles. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it on the podcast a bunch. I feel like it's come up every episode. So anyone who's listened to all the episodes is probably annoyed of me saying this, but especially in the social media age, like everyone sees the young kid on social media that made all this money and it happened so quick. And now they think that this is the normal thing. You start a business, it does well, it skyrockets, and now you're set for life. But the vast majority, if not all businesses, that just does not happen.
Yeah,
and you have
absolutely.
to be willing to put in those long days and just keep getting better, 1% better every day. And I feel like a lot of these adages that we're talking about are things you hear in locker rooms if you play sports growing up from coaches, 1% better every day, keep hitting singles.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you were a collegiate athlete as well. What are some of the things that you learned from being an athlete that maybe changed you personally, or things that you kind of have kept embedded in your meta that have helped you building the business and building the life that you have now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually I'm still close with the men's Colgate lacrosse team. They were up here a month ago. So every year they come up here, we do a dinner to kind of like right in the middle of the season on their spring break, which isn't that beautiful in Hamilton, New York. So they all come up here. We have dinner. We kind of talk about the season. It's a way for us to me to stay connected with the team. And I get to give them a talk each year. And this year I talked about how, I wasn't I was just featured in the Colgate magazine the last episode, and I laughed because if they saw my grades, I think everybody would think twice about putting me in the magazine. But I wasn't, the best student. I think, the majority of my lessons did come on the lacrosse field in Hamilton. And anybody who's played lacrosse in Central New York knows, playing games in February is brutal, and March, and especially in Hamilton, New York, with everything, with sticks breaking, your hands freezing, all the things going wrong, having tough seasons. But building a bond inside the locker room and really working towards a common goal, that is win or lose, all the sacrifices that we make, whether it's getting up at 5 a.m. to go to practice, taking long bus rides together, losing in overtime, just all the things you go through, and you build those bonds. And I said to the guys, some of my best friends in the world are still guys that I met on the lacrosse team and played with, and I saw them kind of looking at each other like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's 44 years old and he's still best friends with guys he had, built those relationships with. So, so many lessons I've learned through sports, and even a business like ours that's perceived to be so successful, we've had so many challenges in this business, and there's been so many points in this business where it would have been easy to just give up and quit, whether it be regulatory changes or packaging changes or recalls or things just not going the way you want. And as a leader, it's really important for me. I'm more of an introverted leader. I'm very calm, so I try to stay relatively steady. And I think in our business, that's helpful. But also just bringing in the absolute best people you can find who are committed to the same cause. And for us, the messaging from inside the company is very clear, right? It's about legacy. It's about continuing the business. And I think for the employees here, it's something really fun to rally around, right? Because we're not motivated by profit. We're not motivated by all these external things that a lot of businesses get caught up on. We're very clear, right? We want to try to get this business to the 6th generation, if there is a 6th generation. Right. We want to at least have a chance to do that. And that jump will be very complicated, which is a whole nother discussion. But we just want to make sure that we leave the business better than we found it. And each generation is responsible to bring something new to this business, right? So the 5th generation brought the 1911 piece of the brand and the cannabis business, two distinct pieces of our business. And so, the 6th generation will bring something else, right? Who knows what it'll be, but I'm sure it'll be exciting. And so that's what we do.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And it's like you said, from the outsider's perspective, there's this awesome, incredible business that's doing incredibly well. But even now you're realizing that the jump to the next generation is always going to be difficult because there's always going to be these changes and all these things. So it's awesome to be thinking about and having these very realistic expectations and understanding of the challenges that the future is going to, provide for us is massive. And one of the things you touched a little bit upon is now expanding also into the cannabis business, which is, new, at least in New York relatively, especially compared to the entire scheme of this business. What was it like jumping into that? How did you decide to do that? I actually heard, telling you before in an interview, you talk about that you bet the entire company on making that jump to Ayrloom to do cannabis. What was that transition period like? Was there pushback from different, sides of the company or different people involved? And how did you guys navigate going through that, especially when regulations were so strange when they first came out?
Right. I guess we did bet the family farm, right? Like on cannabis. I think it was a very strategic bet and one we talked a lot about, but we absolutely went all in on cannabis. We approached it from a little bit of a different angle. One, it was like a great crop, additional crop we could grow here. And we're always looking for any crop that can be profitable, right? Because apple farming is not a profitable in its own. So, and a crazy stat is the 1 acre of cannabis that we grow here at Beak and Skiff generates more profit than our entire 1,000-acre apple orchard, which always, that stat always blows my mind. Yeah. But our journey into cannabis was a little bit different. Like we came at it we partnered with New York State through the hemp research pilot program 6 years ago. And we got into under the research project of we're going to grow a hemp crop, process it, turn it to CBD, and we're going to create a CBD beverage. And so we wanted to do that entire vertical supply chain, very similar to what we do in the apple business, right? We grow apples, pick them, press them, and ferment them. We control the entire chain. So we did that. We did that in cannabis. And we did it very well. We got it all the way to finished product. And I tell this story because we had partnered with Wegmans grocery stores on creating an organic CBD coffee, cold brew coffee. A lot of people would think it would be a seltzer, but in this case, we were making cold brew coffee for them. The coffee buyer thought it would be cool. It was like buzz, but also a little bit of a calming effect. It was this amazing combination. We grow the hemp, process it. We make the cold brew coffee, we infuse it, we get it all together. The night before, we come out with a press release. And in the morning, it's going to ship to all 120 Wegmans stores. And we get raided by the FDA comes in and they're like, you're not shipping this product. It doesn't meet requirements. Actually, I think it was it that? No, it was Ag and Markets at the time, New York Ag and Markets. So we had to destroy all the product, right? So we created a warehouse full of product. We had to destroy it. Not only did it not ship, we had to take the loss and get rid of all the product. And we had been partnering with New York State through this program. And it just shows you how agencies don't speak with each other, right? We were dealing with one agency, another agency said no, it didn't matter. And on top of that, I pissed Wegmans off, which you never, you never want to do.
Bad idea in upstate New York. Yeah.
So that product never made it on the shelf. And that was a lesson of, we learned a lot through that process. One was how quick regulations can change, and in the cannabis industry, and we're still dealing with that today. And that was just, at the time I just felt like giving up, right? I was on vacation. I get the phone call. I'm like, of course this happened. Like you just want to give up in that moment. We continued to grow hemp, not super profitably. We built a facility. And then when, New York did eventually go legal, we were at the front of the line to get a license because we'd been participating in this program. We'd been interacting with the hemp plant for, at that time, over 2 years. We'd grown it successfully, proven to New York State we were responsible with it. And so now you think we had 10 years of developing beverages, developing products, branding, and now we had a new product and a new category we could go after. It was such an exciting time. And when we launched the first dispensary that opened in New York City called Housing Works, it opened right before Christmas. Not only did we launch with beverage, which is very rare in a new licensed market, but we opened with vapes and gummies and topicals, and we had a full array. So from the beginning of the legal industry, launching in New York State, we had a full array of products, and people really connect with Ayrloom. The name Ayrloom for us is very intentional because in the apple business, heirloom apple trees are passed down from generation to generation. They're really hard to grow. If you talk to my cousin Pete, who runs our farm, like he hates growing heirloom apple trees. They flower it, they blossom at weird times. Some years you have a bumper crop. Other years you don't. It's called biennial bearing. The apples don't taste good. They're really acidic. They have a lot of tannins in them, but they make the best hard cider. So there's a product we make here called Lafayette, and Jan Fair, our head cider maker, loves it. It's the best product he makes, and it's made from heirloom varieties that we grow here. So when we thought about creating the name for our cannabis company, we went with Heirloom, spelled it a little bit differently, but it really embodies what we stand for here at Beak and Skiff. And Heirloom is just another branch on the tree of a business that we created. It happens to be our most successful branch and our biggest, but it's very much connected still to Beak and Skiff.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I'm a big fan of Heirloom, and people around me that are also cannabis users everyone realizes what a premium product it is.
Right.
And I noticed it the first time I used any of the Heirloom products, and I've really stuck to it since then. And with something like cannabis, that's such a, everyone knows what the product is. There's no explanation. You don't get returns. Everyone knows what the product is. How do you, how do you differentiate from other brands that are coming up? And how do you also tie it in to what you're doing here at Beak and Skiff? How important was that to you? But also, tying it in, keeping it true to the brand, but also having it also stand alone and be representative of its own thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we would go to dispensaries, we did a lot of research when we were creating Heirloom, when we'd walk into dispensaries in other states. And the average person who walks into a dispensary, we believed at the time, was very overwhelmed, right? There was lots of brands on the shelves, lots of categories, a lot of labels, not brands, right? So many labels on the shelf, but not good branding. And when you looked behind these brands, there wasn't much there, right? These might have been brands created in the last year or a few months before when the market went legal. And we felt like if we created we felt like the story behind the brand is really important. It was the secret sauce of 1911. There was a meaningful story behind the brand. And the other thing we noticed in dispensaries was customers not only did they know not what brand they should go with, but they didn't know why they were in the why the products were marketed the way they were. For us, if you pick up a typical Heirloom product, it's going to be very specific and intentional on telling you what it does, right? So one of our best-selling products is called Pillow Talk. It's in the name, and then the product has melatonin in it. It has CBN, which is a minor cannabinoid that helps with sleep, and that product is telling you in the name it's for sleep. And then we have a line of vapes called Mood, and those vapes are very intentionally branded that way. Some of the vape pens are focus and energy and calm, and we're trying to tell the consumer at the register exactly what this is going to do for you. And that's really been what I think the success of Heirloom. One, the products are very effective. They're all effect based. That's how we created them. But when someone consumes the product, it does exactly what it says it's going to do. And then in our beverages and edibles, we use a fast-acting emulsion. So a lot of people will just put distillate into the product, and that actually takes over 10 to 15 minutes for it to actually be soluble and absorbed in your body. When we use the water-soluble product, it's nano-emulsified. It takes effect in almost instantaneously in your body. So for beverages, that was very specific because when you're consuming an alcoholic beverage, you feel it immediately. We wanted the same experience to happen. And Heirloom led with beverages. That was very intentional because we felt like the category was very stigmatized. I actually put a post on LinkedIn a few days ago just about the letters we received, the fun letters we received from legacy customers here at Beak and Skiff who disagree with us getting into the drug business. And to be accused of being a drug dealer is always very funny to me, but off something that happens to me quite often. We felt like beverage more than any other category would help fight that stigma because, if you're going to go to your mom's, birthday party or your sister's graduation party, it's probably not socially acceptable yet to light up a joint, right? But you could bring a beverage and maybe grandma could enjoy that. And your sister, if she's of age, could enjoy that. And we've seen so many of the barriers broken down through beverage. Having an alcohol and a cannabis company together I've had this interesting seat to see where the moral line people think the moral line is,
Right.
And why. And so much of it is just the messaging in the drug wars of the past.
Absolutely. And I talk about it with people all the time. Really, the only reason that there is this stigma here and not here is just because alcohol has been legal this whole time.
Right.
Like imagine, prohibition had continued. Imagine trying to get alcohol passed through the FDA today. Like the chances of it happening are so slim.
Yeah.
But for some reason, there's this connotation with cannabis, again, just because of how it was branded, when it was illegal and when there was all this prohibition period going on.
Well, if you think so, last year, 2025, documented deaths in the United States, over 100,000 alcohol-related deaths. Now, I don't like to quote that information, right? Because I'm an alcohol producer.
Right.
I sell bourbon, I sell hard cider. I sell all kinds of alcohol products at scale in most of the states throughout the country. If you look at opioid deaths, right, over 100,000 last year. You could say they're overdoses. Well, I call them fentanyl. They're poisonings, right? People are being poisoned with this stuff. So when someone takes time out of their day to call or send an email to me saying that we've crossed some moral line, I like to laugh. I don't get too worked up, but it does make you step back and think a little bit, about why a shot of bourbon's appropriate and, when you're drinking Heirloom, maybe not as appropriate. I can tell you this, I've never received one email from a customer drinking 1911 who's told me that it's helped with cancer or anxiety or sleep. I get those all the time for Heirloom. So,
right. Yeah, that's great.
That's cool.
That's great. And it's a super important thing to just stand on. You guys have this belief, stand on it, make your stance and go for it. And I've talked about it in another episode as well. Like you can't actually with the Spatchcock guys, and they're so strong on this too, is you can't not have your beliefs. You can't just ride this middle line always and just try and please everybody. It's never going to work. Your brand is going to be wishy-washy. So taking the stand and doing what you guys do is the best thing you can. And you mentioned it here too, it's super interesting. Having an alcohol and a cannabis business, they seem like they directly compete.
Right.
And especially during the legalization of recreational cannabis across the country, a lot of alcohol companies came out in droves to basically protest it and push back against it because they see the threat to their business. What is it like for you? I mean, and I said it to you earlier, I can't, I don't know of, maybe there are, but I don't know a lot of large alcohol manufacturers that are also in the cannabis space, at least not effectively the way that you guys are. Right. What is it like to have a viewpoint from each side, and how do you market and sell both of these are seemingly competing products?
Yeah, no, I think, the way we look at the drinks business in general, because at our core, we're a drinks manufacturing business, whether it's distilled spirits, non-alcoholic beverages, hard cider, cannabis. And we think about the drinks business as an occasions-based business, right? Mm-hmm. So there's going to be an occasion for a hard cider. There's an occasion for a cannabis beverage. They all have different occasions. Do they compete with each other at times? Sure. I've heard people say they're drinking considerably less alcohol as a result of discovering Heirloom, and that always is. That's I like hearing that. Mm-hmm. I think that's great. But at the same time, we think that there's occasions for all beverages, and we try to meet people in those moments, right? So like our micro 1 milligram THC beverage, well, that's great. You could have that in the morning. You could have that, throughout the day. I like to believe, and people would debate me on this, that cannabis is actually a performance enhancing product, especially when you're getting into minor cannabinoids and ratioing and using CBG or something that's going to give you energy throughout the day, make you a little more creative. So is that competing with alcohol? I don't know. It's meeting someone in a moment where they're not necessarily going to drink alcohol. Are alcohol sales down nationally? 100% yes. You see it all over the country. Craft breweries are really struggling. A lot of the craft breweries are struggling in my mind because they got behind products that weren't always healthy, right? There was this craze of the New England IPAs. Well, those have hundreds and hundreds of calories. They're packed with sugar. And I think customers are really looking at that. And I think the perception of hard cider is that, it's naturally gluten-free. Is there sugar in it? Yes, but it's naturally occurring. And I think overall it's a healthy product that people can enjoy. But we have this amazing seat where we can see both happening, and do they balance each other out, right? If like cider's down a little bit and cannabis is up, absolutely. But that goes back to the ethos of our entire farm. We're all about diversification,
right? And
cannabis brings diversification, and that anything that helps us diversify from putting a giant trampoline up at Apple Hill, which we're working on right now, to creating Heirloom. All of those things go back to our core, what we're trying to protect, which is the family farm.
Right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And you see the stats all the time that Gen Z especially are wildly rejectant to alcohol as
Right.
opposed to cannabis and other things. I guess I'll just a quick piece on that. Was that ever a thing that you guys talked about in terms of diversifying and looking towards the future? Was that kind of just a happy accident that you were going to do this cannabis business anyway, and it kind of works out that the next generation seems to be much more accepting of that than other things?
No, it was we're very data driven here, right? We do things on field, but we also stay grounded in data, and we were seeing the data, and we looked at what was happening in Colorado when it went legal, and how that affected the alcohol business, which was definitely negatively, and we saw that as a threat to the hard cider business. Interestingly enough, hard cider's been very stable through the decline in the alcohol business the last 3 to 5 years. We've seen cider, especially regional ciders, perform well. And the beauty of a regional cidery like ours is we can go be relevant in Florida. We can be relevant in North Carolina because we're not competing with other local ciders in those markets.
Right.
Are there some local ciders? Absolutely. But what's a local cider in Florida, right? There's no like apple orchards down the street. The challenge with craft breweries is they're local down to like the town they're in. That's a very feast or famine formula, and it can be very challenging because if the people in your town start drinking less or people stop showing up, things can be tough. Well, we can sell cider in Ohio, and we can sell it in other states. And it's been embraced. And we see customers who've experienced our brands in those states come here and like have the Beak and Skiff experience. And people who bring their family friends here, but maybe they live in Ohio, well, they can interact with our brand in Ohio. So it's been this great relationship, and something we're very proud of. And the same cider you're going to taste here is going to taste exactly the same there. So the quality and consistency has to be the same. We're very driven on quality and consistency, and we do tastings here weekly with our teams. We have a very consistent tasting panel where we review all of our beverages, and we reject things often. We want to make sure they taste exactly how they're going to taste, because at the end of the day, apples are an agricultural product, right? Season to season, there's changes, whether it be sugar content or acidity. Things are changing with the apples, and just like grapes, the land that they are grown from impacts the taste. So we're always making adjustments, and Jan, our cider maker, he's blending different varieties, and a lot of people don't even realize that in the apple business. Like in our original cider, we keep a consistent blend of 4 apples. It's Empire, Honeycrisp, Macintosh, and Gala. We're always blending those 4 varieties into the cider because that's how we get the consistent quality taste. Because if somebody gets hooked on our original cider, we want to make sure it's tasting the same, just like a Budweiser would taste the same.
Right. Yeah. And you guys, very well known locally, of course. You're an incredibly well respected brand in the area, and like you said, you've obviously branched out massively throughout the country.
Right.
And a couple of things with that. One, you kind of mentioned keeping the quality. I feel like when a lot of brands grow, they grow rapidly, they start growing out, they lose some of that quality that comes with a local brand, which is why people love to support local, aside from, keeping the money local and all these things. How do you guys, manage the expectations of being that local brand, really, being embraced by the upstate New York community, while also expanding out? And where do you see, I don't want to say challenges, but where do you see the biggest topics of conversation coming in when it comes to going from a local staple in a community to branching out nationwide?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I always love to say Syracuse gets behind their local brands. It's unbelievable when Syracuse people latch onto a local company. I just feel like they're so loyal. And I love that. And I'm so proud of that, because I see myself doing that with local brands here as well. And that's been amazing. I hear all the time about people who've been coming to Apple Hill for generations, and it's a generational thing in their family. They've always come to Beak and Skiff. They've ridden Buttercup or whichever pony they've ridden, and it's a tradition in their family. And so, like, to have a business where family traditions are created is incredible. So that I love always thanking Syracuse for that, because it means a lot to our family business. And then as we branch out outside of New York, the message is very simple. What is Beak and Skiff? Well, we grow apples, right? Because the majority of our competition, other hard cider brands, they can't say that.
Right.
It's a very clear message that our sales team uses. We grow apples, and that one line signals to the customer, well, this is a farm. They take pride in farming. It must mean they pick the apples and they press them and they run and they go up the vertical supply chain. And the fact that we grow apples allows us to control the quality and the consistency and the blend of apples that goes into the product. And that's why we can travel to Florida with our product and it's going to taste exactly the same. So that's what we say. We grow apples. And that line is something we're very proud of because, maintaining a farm is really, really hard. So today it's like 50 degrees and sunny and it looks pretty nice. But like if we were sitting here in February and it was 10 degrees, well, there's still guys in the orchard trimming our trees and doing the hard manual labor that it takes to keep an apple orchard going, with over 300,000 trees. It can be tough. It's not easy work.
Right. Yeah. And you guys have expanded out in so many different ways. I feel like every question is like reaching into a new level in the ways that you guys are expanding the business. And one of my favorite things you guys are now doing is having concerts here on site as well. So, I mean, as I mentioned in the open, you've got so many things going on in so many different verticals. Talk a little bit about how the concert idea came about, especially after going to concerts here. It just makes so much sense, right? Like you can come and, experience the farm and come to the tasting room and there's, all sorts of beverages and things going on there's like a whole event going on in front of then a concert at the end of the night.
Absolutely.
So how did that whole ethos come to be about having the concerts here, and what was your thought? What was your goal with it? And did you see the success? Did you see it as like an obvious choice to do this thing, or was that kind of a risk as well?
I remember I used to go to Coachella Music Festival. My 30th birthday I spent there right when Beak and Skiff wasn't a thought in my mind. So I'm 44 today, so 14 years ago. And I loved going to music festivals. Music's something I'm very passionate about. I always joke with Dan Smalls, who's the promoter I partner with here, because I love EDM music. Mm-hmm. And so like we're always fighting every year about like, hey, can we get an EDM band? And we never do because it's too loud and like we don't want to get run out of town.
Right.
So I make compromises there. But as a kid, when I would come here, the land is it's set up perfect. And where we do our concerts in the back, it's set up like a natural amphitheater. It's just like, it's built for concerts. And going back to like that 6-week challenge I was talking about earlier, how do we get people to come here when it's not apple picking season is very, very hard. And we've done lots of things over the years. Music seems to connect with people and really pull them in. And for us to be able to put our branding, whether it's 19 or Ayrloom, next to a national act, we don't have to make any. That's just worth the investment, a marketing investment. So if you look back 3 years ago, we had like, what's an example of a great artist? Like,
Noah Kahan's the first one that comes to my mind.
Yeah. So Noah Kahan was here. I actually shot basketball hoops with him. We took him on a tour of the farm.
Awesome.
And today he's selling out arenas.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that's the other thing too with the concert thing too. It seems like whether it's your guys or the promoters, I mean, you guys have struck big on some of these acts coming through. You've had a lot of massive acts that not only are big draws and people are coming from now all over to see what you guys have going on here, but they've also gone on to now, I think even by the time that Noah had played here, he had basically already outgrown venues of this size. I mean, you'd booked him like at the perfect time.
Yeah, we booked him in December and he actually, I actually had never heard of him. And our promoter was like, let's take a chance on this guy. And that's how much bigger he'd gotten in 6 months. By the time he played here, we had sold it out and people were trying to run through the orchards to get to him. But for us, one of the things, if I look back before those moments, I tried to play concert promoter on my own for a while. Mm-hmm. And that was a perfect example of like, learn from your mistakes, because I tried to do that on my own. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I wildly overpaid for bands or booked bands that I liked that didn't end up doing well. And Dan and his team at DSP, they're incredible because they book, they have venues from like 300 cap all the way up to, 7,000-8,000 cap. So they can move artists up as they're growing. And so, partnering with Dan and seeing what he was doing with Omegang down at Omegang Brewery, I got him up here, 5 years ago, and we walked around. It was like the middle of the winter. And we just kind of talked about our vision. And what we realized is like we were very like-minded, right? We wanted to build for the future. We were long-term thinkers, and it's been this match made in heaven because they have such a great pipeline of artists. And every year they'll book one or two bands, and I'm like, who's this band? Like this year we have a band called Hot Mulligan coming that I'd never heard of, and it's sold out. Like it's like a, it's not a genre necessarily that I listen to, but it pulls in. They do such a good job of like pulling in new customers to our farm, right? Who want to come see a country show, or want to see like a Lake Street dive or a Slightly Stupid. It brings in all these new people, and then they're here and they interact with the product and the farm. And not only like the people have a great experience, but when the artists come here, we try to make it feel like an off day for them. Like they're just so used to pulling up to amphitheaters or clubs. And when they pull up here in the middle of an apple orchard, I always like to say there's two kinds of artists that show up here at Beak and Skiff. There's the artist that comes, they've got the cold plunge, they go for a run, they're doing yoga with their trainer. Mm-hmm. And then there's the artists, I won't name them, any of them, but they come here and they're like, how fast can we get 1911? They're drinking 10 or 15 1911s. They're having Ayrloom and they're partying all day. And I'm like, and then they do the show and they're on the bus at 2 a.m. and they're off to the next place. It's a crazy life. I couldn't do the music life, moving around from venue to venue, but I've had the chance to meet so many interesting artists. And what's been amazing is like, they like to come back, like, right? So like Lake Street Dive's coming back here this year for like the 4th or 5th time.
Wow.
And they just love being here. They like the vibe of the orchard. And
right.
I think it's just a peaceful environment and just a place for them to like relax with their, whether it's their family or friends, and just have a good experience with their customers. So music's probably one of the, we don't make a lot of money on doing music here, but it's one of the best things we've ever done for the brand.
Right. Yeah, because you're just getting all these new eyes all the time on the brand, and they're trying the products and all these things. And yeah, and especially too, I can guarantee you that bands love coming here, because from the limited experience I have shooting music, everyone sees the glamour of there are the artists and there's the green room and the tour bus, but like really a lot of it is, if you're playing this big arena, you're in the visitors team second locker room with a couple stools, and like it's not a great time experience a lot of times. So them being able to come here and experience the farm and everything is an awesome thing.
And they like the farm. Like they want to tour around and see what's going on. And like, that's fun. Like they actually want to get out and see what's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've basically run out of things, I'm sure you have so many things going on. How do you, and it seems like just from sitting here talking to you, you're an ideas guy. You're very creative. You're thinking about, where we can pivot, what are things we can do to change. How do you keep yourself, focused on those things, and how do you determine when it's time to say, well, obviously you can't handle all this on your own. You have a massive team here, and how do you delineate this? These are the things that I want to take care of, and these are the big, the big picture items that I want to think about and grow, and then deciding, I need to give some of this off and kind of have people help me out with this. How do you decide which stays in which bucket?
Yeah, well, the hardest thing I've ever had to do here is, I remember there was a very distinct moment, maybe 10 years ago, where I was on the canning line, because for a long time, my brother Steve and I, who worked here, we were just working on the line. Like our goal was to get as much product out as we could. We were doing it by hand, and we were just doing the product. And my dad came up to me, he's like, "You can't be in here anymore. Like, you've got to get out. Like you've got to go. You're the face of the brand. You got to go out and tell the story. Like you're standing behind here." And at the time, I was like, "Well, I like doing this. I'm like more of an introverted guy. I was like doing that, but it was like that moment of like, if you guys don't get out and tell the story to people, no one's going to." And I realized in those moments that I need to tell the story. So in doing that and in doing the jobs, we hit a critical point where I realized I can't do this anymore on my own, and I have to work with good, great people. And we've built a management team here of like younger leaders that's been incredible, who all have great vision, and the power of connecting with other leaders in your company and delegating to them and letting them run with it has been this multiplying force that's allowed us to do what we do. So I'm actually at a point today in the business where I'm less about big ideas for the company. Although I've had a few this year. But we're in a lot of lanes, right? We're the largest. Ayrloom's the largest cannabis company in New York State. 1911's a top 10 national hard cider brand. We're actually, which we didn't even talk about, we're one of the largest producers of cold brew coffee.
Wow.
On the East Coast, we make cold brew coffee. It's not necessarily under the Beak and Skiff brand, but private label for grocery chains. We have a New York-based spirits business. We've got a lot of we've got agritourism, concerts, we're in a lot of different lanes. And I don't think bringing another big idea to the table right now is going to help, right? We've got to execute with what we have. And what really excites me is just thinking about, this is always we're in the middle of May, the apple blossoms are out. It's always this really exciting time in our business because the apples are about to start growing. We're getting closer to summer and fall and all the fun things that are going to happen here. And I realize, like, if I'm not excited about this business, well, then my team's not going to be excited. And I have to bring the excitement every day and continue to push forward and engage with them. And, I'm a pretty calm guy, but I try to be very intentional and just, hammer the same message home on a daily basis and just have fun. Like we're creating products that are fun for people. They create, great experiences for people. Keep pushing ahead, keep getting 1% better each year, right? The compounding effects of that are massive. And I think that's what we've learned over the years is like, yeah, we don't have to grow 50% this year, let's grow 10% and let's continue to work on getting better.
Right. Yeah. The power of positivity is a massive thing.
Yeah. What's our goal here? Our goal is our goal here is not to sell out to a private equity company, right? Our goal here is like legacy and trying to move forward. And like, I want to be able to turkey hunt, up on the hill, 20 years from now. I don't want to have to ask somebody to do that. I want to still own the land, right?
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. And mindset is huge. And I love hearing you talk about that because people forget, just keeping a positive mindset and kind of trying to spin things the right way at times can be the best thing you can do. You don't even realize it until you actually take the time to step back and look around it. Just being positive and keeping the people around you positive is massive to
for sure.
Being able to keep going forward. And, you're an incredibly busy guy with all this stuff going on. You're also, a husband and father.
Yeah.
What is it like balancing those two things? Obviously these are, you want to grow the business, you want to get it to that next generation, and that's a huge deal. But obviously you got to, make sure to delegate time for family and for the kids. And as a business owner at any size, the calls don't stop. You could be on vacation, you're getting calls, you're getting emails. These are things you have to be prepared for when you're doing this. How do you decide when it's okay, enough's enough, I got to put this away, or how do you manage those time differences?
Yeah, well, one, having a great team here. So, I know I don't have to be at every single event. But I have two beautiful daughters, Reese and Savannah. They're 10 and 12, and they've got lots of things going on. But they're starting to like see what, for a while they thought I just took care of the ponies and that was my job, and that was cool to them. Or I made fudge, or because they saw me doing all the things there. Trying to, at times bringing them here. I've been trying to be better about bringing them here so they can experience it, they can see it. I think that's really, really important. That's critical. Yeah, finding balance is hard, whether it be hunting or, exercise, just trying to find ways to get out of the business because this is a lifestyle business, right? You could be here all the time, right? There's concerts, there's, there'll be a party here in this room tonight. I'm sure there's always something going on here. So trying to prioritize and find that balance can be tricky, especially in a day where email is so, people can find you at any given time. But my team knows, like, I allow them to make decisions, right? We're not we don't have a lot of layers of bureaucracy in this company. People are empowered here to make decisions, right? Unless it's a massive decision that they need sign off on, everyone here is empowered to make decisions. And we'll, if people, we've also told people, if you make mistakes, that's okay. And I think the team has learned that, mistakes are okay, and a lot of the ideas around us aren't from me. They're from people within the company who've come up with these ideas. And that's been the best part. My favorite thing is when someone else comes up with the ideas and they work out. That's the coolest part.
Yeah, surrounding yourself with great people is massive. And I've talked on this podcast also a lot about not being. You have to not have the ego to always need to be the most experienced or the most knowledgeable in something in the room. Surrounding yourself with people who you can objectively look at and say they may have more experience, they might have more know-how, and just being okay with that. And how can we learn and how can we grow together is really how you start ramping things up. You don't have you can't be the big dog all the time, and that's completely okay. But also, when hopefully the people listening to this podcast are people who are, they have an idea of a life that they want to live and they want to get to, and they're just trying to figure out, they want motivation and they're trying to figure out how others have done it. What is the difference in your mind of the people that are stuck in between, the life they live now and the place that they want to be? And what, kind of general ideas do you think that those people can apply to their lives to get that momentum moving forward towards what they want to do?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I mean, you've got to, like, for me, my big jump was, like, I decided to move from New York City and to come to the family business. And at the time, the family business didn't look like this, right? The family business was struggling. We just launched 1911. Heirloom didn't exist. This building was just built. There was a lot of inherent risk, right, to move your family here and jump into that. And I think people ultimately, you got to be able to take calculated risks in your life, especially when you're young, right? Like if you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, like take risks, like do things, challenge yourself. The worst that could happen is you're going to learn from your mistakes. So like jump in, trying to find something that challenges you. And then like having passion in what you do is so important, right? I always say we do like team reviews at the end of the year, and like, I can't teach passion, right? I can't teach you to be passionate about what you're doing. I bring passion every day. Go find something that you're passionate about. If it's not here, go do it somewhere else. I'll support you in that decision. So find something that's going to motivate you, because at the end of the day, I can tell you money is just not going to be money will not motivate you long-term, right? It might be a short-term incentive, but it can't be just about money. It's got to be something that you want to do, and maybe start it as a side hustle,
Right.
Start small. So I talk to people all the time who reach out, who are starting different side hustles. And it's just fun to learn about that. And people who follow through and show up, that means so much in today's world, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are fickle. People, communication is tough for some people. So yeah, take risks, take a lot of shots, and learn from those risks, right? Like, in order for us to get to concerts, well, we took 5 or 6 risks before that didn't work out, right? Like, I booked a band here. I won't say the name of the band, but I paid like $10,000 and like 200 people showed up. Like, that math doesn't work, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I had to present that at the end of the year. Like, well, this was a huge L,
Yeah.
but it got us to like Noah Khan.
Right.
And like, I realized I needed to hire a promoter and do things differently. So it's, those lessons are in the failures as well.
Right. I love that a lot. I shot a solo episode of this recently that'll probably never see the light of day after watching it back, because that's a whole other thing I can get into.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things I talked about too is failure, and people are so afraid to fail. And there's this weird connotation that failure means you're taking steps back, when really you're one step closer.
Right.
Every time you fail and you learn from it and you really grow from it, you're one step closer to the thing.
Yeah.
And I think people need to realize that it's okay to fail, and failure is a great thing if you're going to take it in stride and keep moving forward. So that's incredible. Really appreciate you sharing all that. And
yeah, absolutely.
the show is called Someday Soon. So for you, for the business, for the brand, what falls into that someday soon category for you guys, and how is that thing going to set you guys up for the long-term goals of the business of passing it down to that next generation?
Well, someday soon for us, if my grandfather was here, Marshall Skiff, he'd kill me, because I ripped out 6 acres of apple trees just in our pick your own orchard. But that was very strategic. One of some of the feedback we've gotten from customers over the years is like we've invested a lot in the adult activities here, and the kids' activities are lacking. So we're in the middle of building this incredible, what we're calling like the Apple Grove Adventure Park up there. So like, it's gonna have a jumping pillow, and a little mini zip line and animal shelter, and like there'll be all kinds of fun stuff. So that's someday soon, like August 15th. That shit's got to be ready
Awesome.
to go. And like, if I look up there right now, it's a lot of like empty space. So we've got a lot to do before then, and we've got a good team. But that's an example of like, when customers come here every year, we want them to be like, oh, this is new and different. And we don't want it to be the same every year. And I think that makes some people uncomfortable. But so, that's someday soon, and continuing to grow Ayrloom. So, there's 600 plus dispensaries in New York State, on our way to 1,000. So continuing to make sure we're showing up for the customers in New York State with a great product. And we really think, on the hard cider side, we really think 1911 can be one of the biggest hard cider brands. It is one of the biggest hard cider brands in the country, but we think it can be even more relevant outside of New York State. So we're really we're investing in that with our product and our sales team and our marketing message, just trying to make sure we're getting out there. And so that's someday soon. And then looking out into the future, it's really all about messaging and how we keep this moving forward. And some of the opportunities in the future, I'm not even aware of them, what they're going to be. But I know if we keep our North Star, maintaining the land here, and staying grounded, and really humble, and remembering what our roots are, which is like, we're a farming family in upstate New York. And that inherently, is tough. I'm not necessarily a farmer. I wasn't raised to be a farmer, but I saw the challenges of farming. I watched it growing up, and I know how hard it can be. And I had 2 amazing grandfathers growing up. I had my grandpa, who I'm named after, Edward A. Brennan, he was the chairman, CEO of Sears, right, in the 90s.
Wow.
So that would be like being the CEO of Amazon today,
Right, yeah.
So like he ran Sears in its heyday. His office was the top floor of the Sears Tower, and and he was named after me. So I was so proud of that. And then I had Marshall Skiff, third generation of Beak and Skiff, the outdoor farmer who loved the land. And I always would think, these guys don't really have a lot in common. And when they would get together, it would be a little bit like, what do these guys have in common? But as I've grown up and learned, they were so similar, right? They had very similar values. They believed in hard work and building towards something, and really getting that message out to everyone, not only as they grew in their roles, but in their day-to-day. Like my grandfather, who I'm named after, he started on the floor at Sears. He worked his way up from ringing the register at Sears all the way up to be CEO. So be humble, learn from your roots. And I learned a lot from my two grandfathers. So,
that's incredible. Yeah, those guys, I'm sure had some amazing conversations. Again, looking back now, you're like, these guys were just they're in their own lanes, but they have the same mindsets and the same goals and execution. Eddie, thank you so much for sitting down. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of all the products that you guys have had coming. I'm really excited to see where you guys take the brand, and super excited to be a patron of all the businesses. So.
Yeah, thanks for making the time. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you,
thanks
guys.
For coming up here.
Guys, thank you so much for watching the episode. Check these guys out. They're on all social platforms. Heirloom, 1911 established, Beak and Skiff, especially summertime coming up. Guys, anyone in the upstate New York area, come check out the farm if you haven't. It's an incredible time. Eddie, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.